So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror.
In 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, Franklin D. Roosevelt was sworn in as president. He immediately got to work on his promised New Deal, a set of liberal programs and organizations designed to bring about economic recovery. Among these were the ill-fated National Recovery Administration, which was dismantled by a Supreme Court decision in 1935, and the considerably less ill-fated Civilian Conservation Corps, which employed thousands in order to rejuvenate the infrastructure and environment of the nation. While the New Deal was hailed by many as the first step out of the Depression, others thought it didn't go far enough. Three of the most important liberal figures who thought this way were Father Charles Coughlin, Francis Townsend, and Huey Long. Coughlin, known as the Radio Priest, had a peak audience of up to 30 million listeners, leaving it difficult for Roosevelt to ignore him. Coughlin broke with Roosevelt in the early years of the New Deal, demanding that he nationalize the banks. Another influential figure, Francis Townsend, suggested an old age revolving pension plan. The Townsend Plan, as it was known, would have a massive effect on Roosevelt's future policies. Former Governor of Louisiana, Huey Long, got in on the action too. While Governor of Louisiana, he pursued unprecedented public works programs. After the beginning of the New Deal, Long rose to prominence as an outspoken liberal critic of Roosevelt's, and one who could make a strong run for the presidency.
How are you going to feed the balance of the people? What's Morgan and Baruch and Rockefeller and Mellon going to do with all that grub? They can't eat it. They can't wear the clothes. They can't live in the house. Give them a yacht. Give them a palace. Send them to Reno and give them a new wife when they want it. If that's what they want.
Unfortunately, Long was assassinated in September of 1935, bringing an end to his presidential ambitions. Facing constant liberal pressure and having lost his business allies, Roosevelt moved left. In early 1935, Roosevelt began introducing legislation that would come to be known as the Second New Deal. In addition to a public utility bill and a banking bill, Roosevelt signed the Revenue Act of 1935, which established higher income taxes on rich Americans, an idea inspired by Long's share of the Wealth Society. The so-called Soak the Rich tax on the highest tax bracket affected only one person, John D. Rockefeller. He was probably not amused. Roosevelt also signed the Wagner Act, which legalized and strengthened labor unions. Not long afterward, the Congress of Industrial Organizations was founded. Unlike its rival, the AFL, which focused on skilled craft workers, the CIO focused on industrial unionism. Both unions would engage in a heated rivalry, all the while adding more and more members to their ranks until 1955. The Social Security Act, another Second New Deal reform, was signed by Roosevelt in April of 1935. Inspired by Townsend's plan, it set up an old age pension as well as basic welfare programs such as unemployment insurance, aid to families with dependent children, and maternal and child welfare. It was the first true social welfare program enacted in America, and is easily the most important and durable cornerstone of the Second New Deal. As the election of 1936 loomed on the horizon, Roosevelt created the Works Progress Administration. For 8 years, it provided millions of unemployed Americans jobs. The WPA constructed bridges, roads, parks, schools, and other public works projects. It was highly popular and served to solidify the emerging New Deal coalition. The New Deal coalition, consisting of Southern whites, farmers, labor unions, intellectuals, people in government relief, and others, was extremely powerful and durable, not fragmenting until 1968. In 1936, Roosevelt faced liberal Republican Alfred Landon for the presidency. Despite vigorous campaigning from Landon and the unpopularity of some New Deal programs, Roosevelt was able to use his own sense of campaigning and the gradual progress out of the Depression to secure his victory. In his famous Let Me Warn You speech, he mocked the Republican platform and issues of welfare programs.
We will do all of them. We will do more of them. We will do them better. And most important of all, the doing of them
will not cost anybody anything.
Roosevelt, as a matter of fact, won one of the largest landslides in American history. Landon was only able to win Maine and Vermont. He even lost his home state of Kansas, which must have punctured his ego a little bit. After being sworn in for a second time, Roosevelt noticed a worrying trend of the Supreme Court striking down New Deal legislation, such as the NIRA and AAA. Fearing for the future of second New Deal programs, he tried to pack the court by suggesting adding another Supreme Court justice for every justice over the age of 70. This won him little political favor. Roosevelt fell into a deeper hole when the economy suddenly worsened as a result of the government spending less on relief efforts. He used the principle of Keynesian economics to escape the recession, essentially spend money to get out of the recession. By 1938, the labor situation in America was tense. Child labor, while considerably rarer than it had been in the Gilded Age, still existed. Some unlucky workers had to live off of $4 to $6 a week. The Fair Labor Standards Act, signed in 1938, addressed these concerns. The act banned child labor in many industries, set a minimum hourly wage of 25 cents, and set the maximum work week at 44 hours. The Second New Deal ended in the late 1930s as Roosevelt ran out of steam and had bigger fish to fry with the shadow of war looming over Europe and East Asia. The Second New Deal had many lasting effects. One of the most obvious is the increased power of labor unions. Until the oil crisis and conservative resurgence of the 1970s, labor unions enjoyed a tremendous power in the United States. The AFL and CIO merged in 1955 and have supported the Democratic Party almost continuously ever since. It came as a big shocker when the AFL-CIO refused to back Democratic nominee George McGovern in 1972. Perhaps they had the foresight to see the election results coming. Social Security set a precedent for government-assisted welfare in the United States. People now expected the government to take an active role in the well-being of its citizens. Future Democratic presidents such as Harry Truman and Lyndon Johnson pursued expansions to the welfare state. For example, Truman supported a universal health care program similar to Medicare and Medicaid, only wider in scope. Johnson proposed the Great Society, a set of reforms that included civil rights legislation, education reform, and environmental reform.
Not only how to create wealth, but how to use it. Not only how fast we're going, but where we're headed. It proposes as the first test for a nation the quality of its people.
Johnson was also responsible for the creation of Medicare and Medicaid to provide free medical care to the elderly and poor. Former President Truman was actually the first recipient of a Medicare check. The New Deal coalition ensured massive Democratic victories for over 30 years. It was massive and practically indestructible until it was torn apart by forces such as the war in Vietnam, civil rights, and the rise to power of the New Left. Roosevelt and the Second New Deal managed to shift the whole political conversation. Social welfare became a major issue, and was on the offensive until the end of the New Deal coalition. In addition, labor unions gained massive amounts of power, setting the stage for post-war prosperity among middle-class working families. American society could not be how it is today without the Second New Deal.